when you have finished doing your work, or even before you've finished, at any time you can save your work by clicking on the top left corner. There's that word file. It's very much like other software you've used that's similar. You click on File, and you can click on Save or Save As, and you can decide where or when you would like to save any of the stuff you've worked on. And basically, the rule of thumb is that when SPSS is saving the output file, the result file from a statistic that you ran, it has the suffix output there, and you can choose any name you want to save it. If you have data, it'll have a different suffix to it. Leave the suffix alone, what's in there alone, but you can add your own name in front of that, and then SPSS will recognize what you saved. You can save it anywhere you like, and you'll be okay. So saving is usually not a problem, but just notice don't change the don't change the suffix of the file name, and you'll be all right. For example, here the suffix for SPSS output files is .spo, so you just leave that alone no matter what you do, and then SPSS will recognize your files when you run it again. So that's pretty much how it works. Now, one question I would like to cover is I often get the question, well, isn't there a problem if I have a different version of SPSS? No, not really. There really haven't been major changes in the way SPSS works or how it's constructed since it shifted from the programming method of SPSS through version 6 to 8 or so to now. Now you can do everything, with menus, drop-down menus. You can enter data in a friendly way. But if you are working at home with SPSS 13, 14, or 15, the differences in those versions are negligible. And for the purposes of what most people need, it really doesn't matter exactly which version you've got. It will work just fine. The only thing to watch for in SPSS is it's a memory hog, and it's spaghetti coded. By spaghetti coded, I don't mean they put spaghetti on the top of it. What I mean is it's not efficiently coded, so it's a very large program. So if you try to install it on an older computer, it may not have enough room if there's not a large enough hard drive, or if you don't have a fast enough processor, it may not be able to run simply because it's looking for a higher speed processor. It's not efficiently coded in that sense. But nowadays, this shouldn't be a problem because most of the computers we're working on, have very large hard drives and they have higher speed processors. But if you try to do this on an old computer, as I did once way back east, it may give you an error message. I think you'll find that if you take your time and treat it like a spreadsheet entry problem, take time in the data entry, make sure it's all set up before you decide what test you want to run and how you're going to do it, you'll be fine. The big errors I see are people who rush, people who don't organize their data files before they enter the data, or who don't bother to check out what statistics they want to run beforehand, and they get confused and they get frightened. That's the big thing. It's particularly important to check for errors when you're entering data, or take your time. The other thing I want to say is I know that many of you may want to use other software and then try to transport or convert your files into SPSS. For example, some people like to use Excel, and there's no problem with that, and they'd like to convert data files that they have from Excel into SPSS files. There is a conversion program in SPSS, and that can be done, but there's a word of warning about that. In SPSS, when you, if you look at the screen again, SPSS expects nothing in its data file other than the variables that you're interested in. That is, it doesn't expect, or you should not allow anything other than the entries for the variables. The titles are along the top, but they're not really in the same way in the data file. If you import files from other sources, oftentimes other programs like Excel will allow output to appear within the data file and other numbers and things, and that will confuse SPSS. So if you're going to import a file from another source, double check to make sure that the file came through in nice, neat columns, the way you want, and just eliminate any extra numbers or letters that may have appeared when you converted the file from an Excel source, let's say, and you'll be okay. But if you don't do that, if I were to just add some mean or some number that crept in at the bottom, that might confuse SPSS when it's trying to calculate a statistic. So you just want the data in the data file, just the data. Most of the options that you'll use are straightforward. You know, it's not too difficult to find what you need. Just remember, look at the Analyze option, and everything under the Analyze menu, pretty much everything is there that you need. One of the concerns I have about SPSS is I think that sometimes they give you too many options and too much information. So your job is to try to work through that and find what is that which you really need and avoid the things you don't really need.